Hello again, and welcome back to the Torchwood Endurance Marathon. Not much changed within the year that this series was made, only that they managed to sandwich midterm companion Martha Jones in for a few episodes. They also moved the show from BBC 3 to BBC 2 for wider audience appeal and an increased budget. In my opinion, throwing money at the problem doesn't necessarily make it go away though, so let's see what they did to improve on what they established in Series 1. Hate to say it, but Series 2 doesn't get off on a very positive note. The only part I really enjoyed about this episode was the opening with the fish bloke in the sports car. That was hilarious. It's a shame they throw Jack into the mix rather spontaneously and early on in the episode. I would have liked to have seen an episode without him just to see how all the others get on. I was definitely enjoying more of Yanto being on the scene in this series, actively doing things instead of just being Jack's saucy secretary. With Jack's little absence as well, he felt far more like a part of the team, providing some great comic relief from time to time too. This is our first episode with Captain John Hart as well, another time agent Jack knew from the past. Or the future. One or the other. I like the idea, but this character is pretty much just Jack but bad. A totally excessive character that gets away with far too much for me to really care about him. The whole scene in the bar was teeming with cringe, from the predictable kiss to playing song 2 after a punch. Was this whole sequence supposed to be a joke? John's after some MacGuffin that leads to a predictable betrayal. It struck me that without Jack returning, the gang probably wouldn't have fallen for John's tricks. Annoyingly, this episode hits a lot of the same beats as the first series pilot too. You have John being shown around the Torchwood base, just like Gwen, and then later he would betray them just like Susie did. I mean, Susie was at worst moderately interesting. This guy, God, I just don't care. Things got stranger and stranger as it became apparent Torchwood has no means of breaking handcuffs in their entire arsenal. Gwen nearly confesses to loving Jack also, which was so bizarre considering her engagement to Reese. Yeah, this episode just wasn't my cup of tea. The title of this episode gives off the impression I'd be sleeping throughout it, but boy is there lots of shit to discuss with this one. Like in Series 1, they decided that utilising quick zooms like they were filming an episode of The Office would be a good idea. In the interrogation scene, this happens at least 5 times and it is so infuriating to watch. Then when they try to go deeper into this woman's mind, the zooms are practically non-stop. They break budget-saving records by having all this weird biology library footage strewn throughout too. I did like the arm transforming reveal though. It's really morbid and all, but sadly the zooms don't stop there and I can't enjoy a good look at this creepy CGI/prosthetic marvel. When they start discussing what to do with the sleeper agent though, Owen just got bored and started spraying some plants for some reason. Then loads of random people just start getting the creepy arm thing in this little montage. One half of the sequence is genuinely frightening and the other, with the off-screen baby killing and the suicide bombings, were absolutely hilarious. It's more the arbitrariness of it all that threw me off somewhat. Why were these particular people chosen? When were they chosen? I actually vividly remember the scene in the hospital when the original sleeper kills her boyfriend. It's definitely disturbing until, once again, those blessed zooms started up again and just ruined the whole scene. The gang kept insisting their phones weren't working whilst this sleeper goes to a military base, which, again, I think was just a massive joke. Bullets couldn't stop him, but running him over could. Jack's invincibility was actually utilised in an interesting way though, right up until this moment.
Now when are the others coming?
They're already here.
There's so many opportunities in this episode to display cruelty and for it to be interesting, but the cinematography and production values just spoil the episode at almost every corner. God help me if I ever have to watch this awkward episode ever again. This episode has an interesting little concept, especially considering Torchwood's longevity as an institution, and events concerning them nearly 100 years ago having rippling effects on the present definitely resembles World War I's own impact on the world today. Unfortunately, this idea isn't explored as much as it could have been, as there's a greater concern about trying to make spooky ghosts show up in a hospital. It's not exactly scary and continually detracts from potential exploration of this previously described rippling effect. I don't mind Tosh getting another another episode centered around her. The preparation for a yearly date with the soldier called Tommy accompanying her was cute as heck. Even though it seemed to hit a lot of the same beats as the episode Out of Time, they took the concept one step further with a moment in the pub when footage of the Iraq War gives Tommy PTSD. That was terrific. Accompanied by Jack's descriptions of walking into hell, it spurs the imagination, with the lad later comparing Torchwood to the generals that send the boys over the top. It's great stuff. Unfortunately, the rest of the team's involvement in this episode is a bit exposition-ridden and gets quite repetitive by the end. You end up wondering what 1918 Torchwood was dealing with, if anything at all. For some reason, they went into Tommy's mind where those stupid zooms started happening again. It's definitely an improvement on Tosh's previous episode, but I'm not exactly eager to watch it again anytime soon. I had this sneaking suspicion we were going to get another episode like Random Shoes, because it begins with a car crash, but Reese is directly involved in this one and makes it immediately good in my books. Forget the dated CGI, I'd been waiting for him to have a proper integration into the series for a long time. The anti-meat industry themes ring through the episode nicely, and Kai Owen's performance is bloody brilliant. I love the scenes whenever he and Gwen argue. It actually makes the soap opera camera antics feel purposeful and make the scenes feel so raw and gritty. Then they get Reese to infiltrate the meat factory, which was full of great stuff. There was some fantastic jokes about Jack's sexuality, and the double Danish thing was hilarious too. It's here that we see the huge pullback shot of the monster, and it looks cracking. I felt really sickened by the whole operation. How underground and secretive it all appeared affected my gut reaction to it all too. Even those involved in the operation are just people scraping by. Unfortunately, there were one too many of these pullback shots for my liking, and it starts to feel like an RSPCA advert by the end. I groaned a bit too when Reese got shot. I saw it coming from miles away, and it was obvious that he was going to survive. Things spiraled further down the rubbish hole when Owen was trying to inject the monster. That honestly looked awful. The episode redeems itself with the closing scenes though. Ice Cream and Reese's dialogue was just downright perfect. Even Gwen's outburst at Jack about the whole thing had me on the edge of my seat. Will she do it? Will she make Reese forget? The episode ends, and nothing conclusive happens to show if she did it or not. What a cliffhanger! Not the best episode by any means, but a good one all the same. This is another cheap as chips episode that plays on a moderately interesting concept. Somehow an additional Torchwood member infiltrated his way into the base, and not even Jack can see something's fishy here. The way Adams got Tosh wrapped around his finger was creepy as heck, and Owen being dressed up in a humiliating way worked for some great humour too. Unfortunately, this is another quick zoom-ridden episode. There was honestly too many to count in the first 3 minutes. Thankfully, Adams' most damning act comes into play when Gwen comes home and has forgotten who Reese is. It was a weird scene, but acted as the perfect accompaniment to the previous episode's dilemma surrounding the amnesia pill, which she obviously never ended up giving to Reese because otherwise this scene wouldn't quite work as well as it does. This led to a fantastic scene with Reese losing his shit in a shop. I loved seeing Gwen so ridden with emotion in this seemingly insignificant scene, but it broke my heart that somebody would be so cruel to her. Owen and Tosh's scenes were quite bewildering too. She's convinced that she's been with Adam for a year, yet she's spending the anniversary with Owen trying to open a box and drinking beer. It was sad that this was what it took for Owen to fully open up to Tosh about his feelings towards her, but simultaneously I was nagged by the suddenness of their attraction. Piled on top, we have this joke of a line.
My mum said to me, so seize the day, and so I am seizing it, and, you know, I've got so much love to give you, Tosh, and you know, I love you!
Lol, whatever mate. Adam and Jack also started wandering around in random places so that we can see these awful backstory moments. It definitely seemed to be going in the right direction. Jack's the only one Adam has yet to fully manipulate, but the golden sepia tone stuff just looked pretty awful if I'm honest. Also, who calls their child Grey? With Ianto now a fully fledged member of the team, his involvement in this episode was great too. I loved the idea that Adam made him believe he murdered people in cold blood, but unfortunately the execution doesn't quite sit well with me and is riddled with those infamous zooms as well.
I'm a monster.
I'm a monster!
Thankfully, Jack sees the CCTV and realizes Adam's full of shit. You'd think this would have been enough to show all the team members to get them on his side, but no, we have to throw in a weird, dragged out, blue-lit sequence where they all take the amnesia pill. Kind of a dull solution, don't you think? Just to drag it out even further, Adam is seen infiltrating Jack's past. It was all so hilariously bad with Jack taking the pill, the overly dramatic music, and of course, the zooms. There was so much room for potential in this episode. Yes, it has its highs, but by the end, just meh. You know, I'm seeing the Weevil chase at the start of this episode, and it struck me that in the whole season and a half of Torchwood I've watched so far, only one Weevil has actually killed anybody. Even when I was watching Dead Man Walking, I was wondering why they hadn't utilized them as much. They just feel like the token monster of the series. Imagine if they'd revealed themselves to be primordial humans or some offshoot of the Neanderthals or something crazy like that. It's great to see more than one in this series, but honestly, they might as well be zombies. Anyway, we've all been waiting for this one, because it's Martha Jones time, boy! I loved her professionalism and consistency as a character. She's far too innocent for this show, but it was funny seeing Gwen and her getting along. Even the two doctors collaborating was fun. Martha fits like a glove. Okay, not going to get ahead of myself. I don't know what drugs the editors were on whilst cutting up this episode, but there are some bizarre transitions thrown about in here. Aside from that, this episode is far more competently filmed and paced than most Torchwood episodes. Later on, shit starts getting really frightening when COVID-19 just starts erupting out of a patient's mouth.
Wear a thin piece of cloth across your mouth and nose.
The story itself also poses challenges for Torchwood, considering even they have trouble infiltrating this medical facility with this miracle cure thing. Even the music proves to be impressive with this remix of Martha's theme that's heard from time to time. Awesome. Unfortunately, Martha sneaking into clinical trials was pretty BS.
I did have a hepatitis infection.
We could use a subject with hepatitis. Are you available to start right now?
Oh, sure. I've bought my overnight things.
But I was honestly enjoying the episode too much to care. Even Tosh and Owen's date arrangement didn't feel forced or stupid at all. When I mentioned the episode being competently filmed, the best example I can give was how Martha's introduction into the episode was filmed from a point of view shot. Then, halfway through the episode, Torchwood literally sees Martha's point of view with these techno-wizard contact lenses she's given. After some hacking goes on, Martha's got to find a way out of the facility. She's recaptured by means of a tranquilizer dart, and there was another cracking scene when these medical experts establish she's been affected by time and space.
I am not taking that!
But you volunteered.
Oh, 10 out of 10. Meanwhile, this assassin bloke's torso just gets completely John Hurted, which looked fucking awesome and really grossed me out. I thought things couldn't get better, but seeing all the aliens locked up and Martha's stomach lump, oh, it made me giddy. They did us one better by using that device they've tried and failed with multiple times throughout the episode to disintegrate Martha's parasite. Martha flatlining was definitely too bad to be true, and how Torchwood just shut the base down felt rather convenient as well. Thankfully, I can't complain too hard about it, because the whole long-term hacking thing that was going on earlier prevented it from being too conjured out of thin air. They even leave us on a cliffhanger with Owen getting shot by the doctor. Not the doctor, this doctor whom Owen admired. I was just left wondering by the end of this glorious episode, why does it always take 5 passable at best episodes before this show can really start to flex? I don't doubt for a second that the return of Martha Jones carried this triple-decker story. As you guys know, I love the episode They Keep Killing Susie, and this is the episode where this second resurrection glove comes into play. I mean, it's perfectly timed, isn't it? You get to know these 5 characters so well that the moment one of them could potentially die, you'd want to use it, right? This episode also follows up on the pilot's version of Weevils being numerous underground. This sequence with the church being chocker full of them was creepy as heck. However, it did feel a bit inconsistent that Gwen was originally the only person able to use the glove after Susie. Now Jack uses it without issue. I guess it explains why Owen hangs around so long after his quote-unquote death, but I don't know. They just give Gwen all this importance so arbitrarily. We start to see this philosophical undercurrent at play here with Owen seeing death.
What was it like to die?
Don't think I should say.
Why not?
I'm not sure the living should know.
This permanent state of hell that was alluded to, we actually see it in this distorted footage of Owen in the darkness. All that was awesome. This matches up with the creepy blackened eyes that possess him throughout the episode. Owen's retreat to a bar was great, especially when Jack finds him, and then both proceed to get arrested. I never thought I'd see the day when an American would put on a convincing Cockney accent.
I'm over Torchwood on Special Ops.
Special Ops, what's he on about? Special needs, more like it.
Everything Owen took for granted whilst he was still alive is haunting him with his limited capabilities as a dead man walking. This idea peaks when Owen regurgitates his Guinness whilst standing on his head. That moment was so hilarious and disgusting at the same time. I was just basking in the genius of the situation presented to us here. The episode got even weirder when the resurrection glove came to life and turned Martha into an old woman. God, she really has not had a good time working for Torchwood, has she? But what an awesome sequence. This leads her to a hospital where we see death visually represented on screen. I truly appreciated the show's interpretation of death. It's certainly not your traditional cloaked skeleton with a scythe, but more like a shroud with the skeleton starkly in view. They went one step further with the children's ward because not even they are safe. Death comes for us all, and they really ramped up the stakes by having this child with leukemia getting up at night and making me realize just how horrifying this situation is. The CGI actually holds up really nicely too, until Owen got into a scrap with death. Those POV shots look really bad, and I honestly wished this sequence didn't have this dreadful music in it.
There's nobody here but us dead men.
It acts as a cover for all the missing sound effects that they evidently just forgot to put in here. By the end as well, Martha's reverted back to her age for basically no reason, and the whole thing just ends on a rather flat note. Aside from the unsatisfying end though, this was a truly remarkable episode. When I think about this episode, I get flashbacks to that Doctor Who episode titled Lie of the Land. After all the amazing build-up from at least 2 prior episodes, the whole plot just collapses under its own weight. Owen had definitely outstayed his welcome by this point, and I wish that Death could have just claimed him at the end of the previous episode. They strip him of his role at Torchwood, yet he still lingers around like a maid. Martha didn't exactly play a pivotal role in this episode either, despite being so fundamental to the previous 2. There was one great bit where she stitches up Owen's hand. She realizes that this stitch will have to be permanent because he no longer has the ability to heal cuts. It was also great seeing him heartlessly throwing away all his food, insensitive now to people who might actually want or even need it. Even his argument with Tosh was filmed and performed excellently, especially with all the sexual tension and high hopes the pair had for getting together prior to his death. When he pulled back his fingers, I genuinely gasped. All the stuff on the roof with this suicidal woman though? Junk. Call me heartless, but I didn't find this actress's performance convincing at all, and the dialogue completely missed all opportunities of exploring a theme like assisted suicide. The flashback provided some shocking imagery, but it's not like this was a result of Torchwood or anything directly connected to Owen. The amount of times they had to repeat this "you don't know how I feel, believe me I do" moment just grew so old so quickly. Owen claiming that he has no breath really takes him being a reanimated corpse one step too far. How could he be talking if he doesn't have breath? What the rest of the team were up to in this episode? Your guess is as good as mine. Suddenly Owen pulls out the MacGuffin of the story out onto the roof, and I just thought, what the fuck is even going on here? After all that boring, nonsensical drivel, Martha's leaving because she has to? They could have at least dropped her off at the fucking train station. And they end the episode on the cheesiest, rodent-infested note you could possibly imagine.
My name is Owen Harper, and this is my life.
That was so terrible, I think you gave me cancer.
So it's Gwen's hen night, and it's another excuse to try and make Cardiff an exciting and trendy place for young people to go clubbing. These 2 friends of hers just materialise like, oh yeah, I remember those well-established friends we've met throughout the entire series. Not. Then when we see Gwen the next morning, I suddenly remembered this episode vividly in my mind, and rightfully so. It is weird. It's quite a nightmarish scenario, but also hilarious. Stranger still, I seem to remember Gwen's dad dying at the hands of a Slitheen 3 years prior.
Thank goodness we've got you, our esteemed leader.
I did think it a little odd that a total stranger would be at Gwen's wedding, but the creature tying up Tosh and the best man together provided some awkward humour. It was pretty bizarre when the couple and Jack just sneak off to a room whilst the family are just left wondering what the hell is going on. It definitely ramped up in quality though when the alien shapeshifted into Reese's mum. That was a cracker. Jack calling her an ugly bitch was a 10 out of 10 moment, and I thought it was good that Reese was charged with disintegrating the baby. I think the peak moment of the episode though was when Jack was luring Gwen on in his seductive way. I literally typed, "Jack, stop, what the fuck are you doing? No!" Oh, it was the alien, ha ha ha, that was fucking sick. It does raise the issue of Gwen's strange characterization, that she would still be falling for Jack on her wedding day. But the episode ended wonderfully though, as people sleeping at a wedding is quite ordinary, only for them to twist it round by instilling amnesia into all the wedding guests. All in all, quite a cracking episode. Gather round, kids. I'm going to tell you all about how the world's first GIF came to be, and it's done through Torchwood's most forgettable episode. You could sum up the whole thing when Gwen and Owen are sitting in the cinema moaning about the film footage, repeating over and over again. The concept is just not very interesting. It's sad too, because Julian Bleach, who plays Davros in the revival, plays the ringmaster. He is a somewhat positive aspect, and I was interested to know how Jack was part of a circus troupe all those years ago too. Unfortunately, that never really leads anywhere, and the way the ringmaster and this aqua girl just dehydrate people to death was so bland. From the moment I saw the opening of the episode with the woman turning and the child missing and she just doesn't react at all, I knew we were in for some fun. Well, not even fun, really. Turns out they're after some flask, aka the MacGuffin of the episode, and then the spooky stuff started happening again. Like when they tried doing ghosts in episode 3, they just aren't scary and play on really dull and uninspired tactics. Oh, they're playing the movie again. Oh, the piano is playing itself.
This way, please.
Oh my god, just stop. Seriously, Torchwood doesn't need 13 episodes per series. It's too many. They so evidently suffer as a result of this excess. So many could have easily been cut out. There's obviously competence on behalf of the production crew and the actors, but ultimately stories like this one are just, like I said, forgettable. Oh man. This episode actually took me by surprise. I kinda love it. Gwen's old fling police partner Andy admitting he liked her all along was kinda interesting, especially how he notices Gwen doesn't really care that a boy has gone missing, with her eyes being on aliens instead. There was a really cool concept involving the mother of the missing boy as she watches crowds of people hoping to spot her child. It was interesting that with Gwen erring and ahhing about going to a meeting, if she was still police, she'd have said yes right away. Chibnall can excel in creating a sense of community and how people react and adapt to a tragedy. There are a few cool scenes with Gwen and Reese too, exploring their relationship post-marriage. It's fiery and corny and sometimes bitterly tragic too. The fact they can't find the time to talk about kids leads to a great argument with them in the park.
You got a problem at work? You sort it at work.
This led hilariously into finding Jack and Ianto about to get it on, putting Gwen's problems into perspective. Jack has his favourites and secrets, building up the mystery of the missing child further. It made me wonder how long Gwen would be able to stand working in a place that is incompatible with her marriage. With Andy getting in too deep wanting to work for Torchwood, Gwen severs ties with him in this weirdly dramatic boat departure scene. It might be a tad melodramatic, but with her own troubles lumped on top of a neglect for Earthbound issues, it's no surprise really she'd want to go at this alone. I also really liked the cinematography of her going out to sea. It illustrates how independent Gwen yearns to be as a precursor for the shock that awaits her on the island, where she finds the missing child grown up and scarred. This reveal and his description of being chewed up by the rift is so haunting. The whole scenario becomes so whack, and I bloody loved it. The whole idea of taking a regular person to the island to see her insane child, despite Jack warning against it, is wonderful. Emphasized by this shot demonstrating how out of her depth Gwen is. Her idea of giving people closure with the truth seems noble, but is thrown right back in her face with this man's ferocious and terrifying scream. It's kinda ruined by Gwen's narration, taking us right out of the terror and into explanation land.
Before the rift returned him, Jonah had looked into the heart of a dark star. What he'd seen had driven him mad.
The horror came from not knowing, and these details don't serve any dramatic purpose. Despite that though, this episode is an emotional roller coaster. Most of the time I had chills up my spine. Gwen thinking she's doing the right thing when in reality made it worse. I love stories about good intentions gone awry. The path to hell is paved with good intentions after all. Oh yeah, this episode, where they find the bomba. Basically a flashback filler episode. Jax is the first and probably the most interesting of the bunch, mostly for a demonstration of early Torchwood's cruel and brutal methods. I loved these unironic, empire-loving women. I sensed Jack was the one who put the outdated Torchwood in a more progressive direction. I do wish that they had made a direct connection between Jack's first death in Parting of the Ways and how he wound up here in the Victorian era. 1,000 and something deaths earlier just seems way too arbitrary to me. The 1999 segment was pretty sick as well, contextualizing the whole
The 21st century is when everything changes
line as one of the team members loses his mind and kills the entire team. Tosha's backstory goes deep. At first I thought she was making a sonic screwdriver, but it's all rather vague and no mention of a sonic modulator, whatever that is, ever gets mentioned in the canon again. Unit gets involved, and it's disappointing that the recruitment of Martha Jones earlier in the series never made Tosh at least mildly anxious at the prospect of collaboration. However, there was a nice bit of lighting when she's in the cell to show time going by. Ianto's story winds up being the lamest of the bunch as we begin with the fakest looking fight between Jack and a Weevil. This overlit fake moonlight set looks horrendous, but that's nothing compared to Ianto showing up with a big dick stick.
Morning! Coffee?
Wait, hang on. He's outside. Didn't they have paper cups back in 2008? I get it. Jack was reluctant to employ Ianto because he just loved his sweet ass so much he couldn't bear to lose it. But really, they tied the pterodactyl into Ianto's backstory. It looks so shite. And talk about retconning Ianto's secret love affair with the Cyberwoman Chibnall. Finally, Owen's scenario, I was absolutely in love. The others just kinda get buried in rubble, but Owen actually gets left with a giant pane of glass ready to fall on his face. His backstory contextualizes his need for sex, drugs, and booze rather eloquently. His backstory really touched a nerve for me. The whole Alzheimer's in a young person situation really pulled on the heartstrings. Stacked on top of that is him being a doctor who genuinely cannot help her. To then see something sticking out of her brain, that was good special effects. Plot twist though, the bombing was conducted by the shithead John Hart character from episode 1 and Gray, Jack's brother. So this episode has multiple storylines going on simultaneously, with the team putting out multiple fires across Cardiff. It's essentially the Series 1 finale with the rift opening again, but seemingly done with more planning involved on the part of the antagonists. Or so you'd like to think. Unfortunately, the thumbnail on iPlayer kinda gives away that Gray is a bad guy from the offset, so seeing him handcuffed like this wasn't exactly fooling me. There's this Indiana Jones-inspired moment with Ianto and Tosh killing some holy executioners or something, which was kind of funny, but it's spoiled by Tosh's need to explain everything that's happening instead of showing it.
This building houses servers for the military, police, NHS, even looks after the service systems for the nuclear station at Turnmill. 15 major explosions at strategic points across the city. There's currently a surge in traffic.
Trying to leave the city, but the explosions have cut off
all major routes in and out.
I found the pair's sequences to be the most baffling of the lot. For some reason, the server building losing its connection with a nuclear power plant causes it to go into meltdown. The pair then start walking to the power station as though they are the only two people who can bring a bunch of servers back online. The episode displays its lack of budget as well by recycling old enemies, including the Hoiks of all things. John mysteriously blows up different parts of Cardiff, but not the places the Torchwood team would immediately run to. Jack gets taken back to Jesus times, where he reunites with his brother. The low frame rate slow-mo, the flashbacks, the constant killing of Jack. Only to be buried for 2,000 years. The latter thing is a horrible thing to conceptualize, don't get me wrong, but I just don't find Gray's motivation for revenge to be interesting or believable. How did Gray become better than 2 time agents during the time that he was tortured by these unseen creatures? How did he become an expert on time travel and manipulating the rift? If he hasn't seen Jack in all this time, how does he know that he can't die?
What's that? It's a sentimental value.
How can the antagonist, with all this knowledge and power, not be suspicious about what John is doing right here? After giving the most forced pep talk to a bunch of police, Gwen goes back to Torchwood to find Jack. She finds the 2 miscreants there, unleashing more weevils. More of that godforsaken slow-mo and recycled footage harms the episode further, with Reese and the police pushing a cell door that magically opened by itself. I loved that Owen also didn't advise barricading the doors of the hospital or anything before he leaves. He just assumes walking past them all will stop them from eating everyone inside. Somehow he teleports to the inside of this nuclear power plant, where he manages to convince the only scientist working on shutting down the plant to leave.
Go.
Thank you.
He would rather leave the deactivation of a power plant in the hands of his girlfriend.
Can you fix it?
Of course I can, I'm brilliant.
Than somebody who actually works there and would also lay down their life.
What the hell are you doing here? More like the system's going into meltdown.
A soldier never leaves her post.
Okay.
I thought it was pretty admirable that Jack could forgive his brother for leaving him buried for nearly 2,000 years, but then...
The only strength I have is my hatred for you.
Lamau! That is a top 10 anime moment. These characters pull so many props out of their asses in this episode.
Tell me you're joking.
Do you mind if I subdue them, dear?
Be my guest.
What's that? All species sedative. Now, food. You got anything it can eat?
Only these.
Right. Perfect. Be careful, there are creatures out there on the loose. Take this as a kind of mace.
What's that banging?
Something's wrong.
Never mind that, I have an idea.
And just like that, with this chunky Game Boy Advance SP, all the weevils go back to whatever hellhole they came from. Back to the power plant saga, Tosh is able to reroute power thanks to her little chunky smartphone thing, and even project statistics onto this wall in the medical room. Honestly, it's convenient on an extreme scale that Tosh can instruct Owen after being shot, and he just sorts out all the problems at the plant by pushing a few buttons. Then he gets locked into the room and this happens.
Not like this! Get me out of here! I've died once, I'm not doing it again!
I'm gonna wage my way to oblivion.
Ah! Give me one good bloody reason one good reason why I shouldn't keep screaming!
Because it's fucking embarrassing, mate. They drag out the pair's death so much.
We never did get that date, did we?
Why don't you just fucking die already?
The only redemptive quality of this episode is seeing Torchwood as a 3-way, and how excited it makes me to review Children of Earth in like 3 years' time. In all seriousness, thank you all so much for watching once again, and a special thank you to all my patrons who keep me doing what I'm doing. Comment below your thoughts, and remember, this is just my opinion. Subscribe, and see you all on the next review.